Hello all, this is a true experience from one of my subscribers. Before hearing the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This story is sent to us by Tom. My name is Tom and my wife's name is Jenny. We recently got married and both have good jobs. After our wedding, we bought a new house and moved in together. Everything was going well. Since it was Sunday, Jenny suggested that it had been a long time since they went out for a walk, and proposed that they should go for a walk that day. After working for weeks, we were both exhausted and hadn't had the chance to go out for a walk since our marriage. With all the cleaning and installations going on in our new house, it seemed like a good idea to take a break. We decided to go for a walk on Sunday evening after dinner. However, by the time we were ready, it was already past 9 o'clock. I thought it was too late to go out, but Janie insisted that it would be peaceful at this hour and it would be fun to go outside. Up until that point, we had only walked from our house to our workplaces, and didn't know much about the area around us. Nonetheless, we decided to go out for a walk. As it was already nighttime, there was no one else on the road. However, the area we were walking through seemed a bit deserted and wild. The road was surrounded by large trees, which made it quite dark and eerie. I suggested to Janie that we should take the road with lights, but she preferred walking in the dark under the pale moonlight that was shining around us. We both turned on the torch of our mobile phones and continued chatting as we walked forward. Suddenly, Janie stopped walking and turned back, saying that someone had called her name. Jamie. I looked around but didn't see anyone except the two of us. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it and we started moving forward again. But after taking just 7 or 8 steps, something unexpected happened. Suddenly, Janie heard a loud whisper calling her name again. Jamie. This time, the sound was much clearer and louder. She stopped and turned back, but once again there was nobody around. She said that the voice had been faint before, but now it seemed to be coming from somewhere closer. Janie was always up for having fun, so at first, I thought she was joking around. I told her to stop fooling around and let's keep moving. However, she insisted that she was not joking. Despite her unease, we continued walking and soon spotted a big tree just a few steps away from us. We sat down on a platform near the tree and started chatting. By then, it was almost 11 o'clock at night. After a while, Janie complained of feeling a little heavy-headed, so we decided to head back home. However, as we took a few steps, something strange happened. Janie suddenly sat down and clutched her head, unable to take another step. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that she was feeling very sick. I began to worry about how we were going to get back home, and hoped that a passing car might give us a ride. However, there were no cars on the road at that time. Janie, on the other hand, was not worried and suggested that we just walk back home. As we started walking, Janie suddenly looked at me and said, "I don't want to go home." I was taken aback by her sudden change in behavior and couldn't help but wonder what was upsetting her. For a moment I thought we would have a big fight on that road. I said to her, "Let's go home first and get sorted out there." Suddenly she was very angry and said, "I don't want to come with you, you go home." I was taken aback by her sudden outburst and didn't know what to do. She started walking backwards towards the tree where we had sat before and kept her eyes fixed on me. I tried to reason with her, but she didn't seem to listen. Finally, she sat down and started looking at the ground, letting her hair loose and laughing loudly. It was a strange and unsettling situation, and I didn't know what to make of it. We had just gotten married, and I couldn't understand whether she was serious or just joking. I went back to her and said, "This is no time to joke. Let's go home." She turned her head towards me, and looking at her sent chills through me. Her eyes had turned red, and her skin was pale. I caught hold of her hand and said, "Let's move." Suddenly I saw a car coming towards us, so I waved. The driver stopped and agreed to give us a ride home because he saw Janie's condition. We got into the car. The driver started the car, drove for some distance, but then the car started to stall. He tried for some time but all in vain. The car didn't start. So me and Janie got out of the car. After Janie and I got out of the car, to our surprise, the car started again and the driver continued driving. However, when he looked in the rearview mirror, he noticed two more men standing with us. As soon as he saw them, he sped away, leaving us alone. While I looked at the car leaving, Janie sat down and started banging her hands on the road. Blood started oozing from her hand. She turned her head towards me, showed her hands, and she started licking the blood. Seeing all this sent chills through me. This was a serious situation. Without hesitation, I lifted her and somehow got her home. After reaching home, I sprinkled water on her face, tried talking with her, but there was no change. She was behaving weird. My mother once told me, if you're in danger and do not understand what to do, recite prayer. So I started doing the same. As I began reciting the prayer, Janie started shouting at the top of her voice and banging her head against the walls. I was terrified, but I continued to pray. After a while, she fell unconscious and collapsed on the ground. I lifted her up and laid her on the bed. A few moments later, she regained her senses and started feeling better. She asked me what had happened because she couldn't remember anything after they left from the big tree. I didn't discuss it further and asked her to take rest. We both went to sleep. At around 2:30 a.m., somebody knocked on the door. I was fast asleep, but Janie woke up and opened the door. I heard some commotion, but when I looked around, I realized that Janie was missing from the bed. The door was wide open. I went outside to look for her. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It sent chills through me. Janie was standing near the well, which we had just outside our house. She was looking at me and holding her stare. I rushed towards her, but before I could reach her, she jumped into the well with a loud shriek. As I arrived at the well, I heard her crying in an eerie disembodied voice, accompanied by the sound of splashing water, as if the whole well was churning. It was dark, and I couldn't see anything inside the well. I didn't know how to swim and couldn't find the courage to jump in. After some time everything stopped. I couldn't hear sound no more. It was the most terrible night of my life. I had lost my wife that day. I was disoriented and didn't understand what had happened in those few hours. The world had turned upside down for me. I regretted all my decisions that night. Later, a few days after, I came to know that the dark unknown path we had walked that day was a way to the cemetery, and we didn't know that. That night's experience is something I will never forget, and it's something that is going to haunt me forever. Hey there, if you still here. And if you enjoying getting spooked, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Take care. It was a warm summer night, and the moon was high in the sky. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the occasional sound of crickets and frogs. Everyone was sleeping peacefully, except for those who dared to venture into the swimming pool. There had always been rumors of a ghost haunting the pool, but most people dismissed them as mere superstition. However, on this particular night, something strange was about to happen. A group of friends had decided to take a late-night swim in the pool. They laughed and splashed around, enjoying the refreshing water, but suddenly, one of them felt something brush against their leg. It was cold and slimy, and it sent shivers down their spine. They looked around, but there was no one there, or so they thought. As they looked closer, they saw a faint figure in the water. It was a ghostly apparition, hovering just below the surface. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and its hair floated around its face like seaweed. The friends froze in terror, unable to move or speak. The ghostly figure began to emit strange sounds, like a chorus of moans and groans. It seemed to be trying to communicate with them, but its language was indecipherable. Slowly, the ghost began to move towards them, still submerged in the water. Its approach was slow and deliberate, as if it was savoring the fear of its victims. Suddenly, one of the friends found the courage to scream, and they all ran out of the pool as fast as they could. They never looked back, too afraid to see if the ghost was following them. From that day on, the swimming pool was avoided by everyone in the neighborhood. The ghostly apparition was never seen again, but the memory of that terrifying night lingered on, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness. As the friends ran out of the pool, they could feel the ghostly presence following them, but they were too afraid to look back. They ran into the house, slamming the door shut behind them, and tried to catch their breath. But as they looked out the window, they saw the ghostly body floating on the water, not clearly visible in the darkness, but still unmistakable. Its eyes were fixed on them, and its mouth was contorted in a gruesome smile. The friends knew they had to do something. They couldn't let the ghost haunt the pool forever. So, they decided to confront it, armed with whatever courage they could muster. They went back to the pool, but this time, it was different. The water was colder, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. They could feel the ghostly presence, but this time, they could also see it. The ghostly body was floating on the water, its arms outstretched towards them. Its eyes were empty and soulless, and its skin was pale and translucent. It was a horrifying sight, and the friends could feel their resolve faltering. But they had come too far to turn back now. They took a step forward, and the ghostly body moved towards them, the water rippling around it. Suddenly, one of the friends felt a cold, clammy hand wrap around their ankle. They tried to shake it off, but it was too strong. The ghost was pulling them into the water. The other friends tried to pull their friend back, but it was no use. The ghost was too strong. They watched in horror as their friend was dragged into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. The friends were left alone, trembling with fear. They knew they had to get out of there, but they couldn't leave their friend behind. So, they searched the pool, diving deep into the water, but their friend was nowhere to be found. As they climbed out of the pool, they could hear the ghostly laughter echoing in their ears. They knew they had narrowly escaped with their lives, but they also knew that the ghost would always be lurking in the pool, waiting for its next victim.
There was a young woman named Emily who inherited a large old mansion from her late grandmother. The mansion had been in the family for generations, but had been abandoned for years and was in a state of disrepair. Despite its ominous appearance, Emily decided to move in and renovate the mansion. She hired a team of workers and spent weeks restoring the old mansion to its former glory. As she walked through the newly renovated rooms, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. However, as night fell, Emily began to hear strange noises coming from the walls. At first, she thought it was just the old pipes creaking, but the sounds grew louder and more disturbing. She dismissed it as her imagination and went to bed. The next night, the noises returned, but this time they were accompanied by an eerie, cold draft that seemed to sweep through the room. Emily tried to ignore it and went to bed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Over the next few nights, the disturbances grew more intense. Emily would wake up to find her furniture moved around, doors open that she knew she had locked, and the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination, but she couldn't deny the feeling of dread that settled in the pit of her stomach. One night, as Emily was lying in bed, she heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the hallway. She leapt out of bed and ran towards the source of the noise, only to find an old, dusty mirror shattered on the floor. As she examined the mirror, she noticed a figure lurking behind her in the reflection. She turned around, but there was no one there. Suddenly, a cold hand reached out from the mirror and grabbed her wrist, pulling her closer to the glass. Emily screamed and tried to pull away, but the hand was too strong. The figure in the reflection began to emerge from the mirror, revealing a ghostly figure of a woman. The ghostly woman began to speak in a low, menacing voice, telling Emily that she was the rightful owner of the mansion and that she would never leave. The ghostly woman's grip tightened around Emily's wrist, causing her to wince in pain. The room grew colder, and the candles flickered and dimmed until only a dim glow illuminated the haunted room. Emily's heart raced as she tried to pull away from the ghost's grip, but it was no use. The ghostly figure's eyes glowed a deep red, and her hair swirled around her face like smoke. Emily could feel the presence of other spirits in the room, and she knew that she was in grave danger. Suddenly, the room was filled with the sound of ghostly laughter, and Emily felt something tug at her hair. She turned around to see several ghostly apparitions hovering behind her, their eyes gleaming with malevolent glee. The ghostly woman leaned in closer to Emily, her breath cold and putrid. "You cannot escape," she hissed. "This mansion belongs to me, and I will never let you leave." Emily's heart pounding as she struggled to break free. She could feel the presence of the spirits closing in around her, their icy breath sending shivers down her spine. Just as she thought all hope was lost, she remembered something her grandmother had told her. "There is a way to banish the ghosts," she had said. "You must find the ancient talisman that has been hidden in the mansion for generations." With a sudden burst of determination, Emily lunged towards the ghostly woman, reaching for the ancient talisman that hung around her neck. The ghostly woman let out a blood-curdling scream as Emily snatched the talisman from her neck and held it high in the air. The room was suddenly filled with a bright, blinding light, and Emily felt a rush of wind sweep through the mansion. When she opened her eyes, she found herself standing outside the mansion, surrounded by the peaceful stillness of the night. From that day on, Emily never returned to the haunted mansion. But locals say that on certain nights, they can still hear the sound of ghostly laughter coming from the old, abandoned house.